I got married when I was 22 years old. 4 years later, I had two small children. By the time I was 29, I was divorced and chose to raise my children on my own. I chose this path, so I never complained that it was hard or unfair. I knew it was my decision. But there was one thing I had not prepared enough for: money. Before that, I truly believed that love was what mattered most, and money could always be earned later. So, when I left with my two children, I didn't think about dividing assets. I believed I could work and provide for them. But I was someone who lived and worked based on emotions. I had never made a clear financial plan for life as a single mother. And from that moment on, difficulties began to arrive one after another without giving me time to breathe. The three of us moved to live in a small province. I still remember the first day clearly, carrying bags in both hands, two very young children beside me, and only a few basic belongings. The rented house was tiny, with one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a shared living space. My older child was just over 3 years old. The younger one was barely over 1. The three of us lay down on the floor, exhausted, in that unfamiliar space, so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. That was when I finally sat down and started calculating. It was a weekend. By Monday, I had to enroll my children in a small private school, one that ensured the children would be safe and well cared for. The tuition took more than half of my salary. I accepted it anyway, because I wanted my children to be protected. The remaining money had to cover rent, electricity, water, food, transportation, all the expenses I had never truly paid attention to before. That was the first time in my life I learned how to budget for survival. I didn't want to depend on my family. I wanted to live on my own terms and take responsibility for every consequence. I ignored the judgments that said I was clumsy, impulsive, incapable of raising children, incapable of being a wife, incapable of supporting myself. I also ignored the advice telling me to send my children away to earn money, or to find a wealthy man to rely on. I wanted to live my own life. Right or wrong, I would carry the weight myself. At that time, the biggest problem was money. I realized my spending needs were high because I always wanted the best for my children: good education, modern learning methods, clean and healthy food. My salary was not enough. I started writing down every expense in detail: tuition, rent, milk, rice, cooking oil, soy sauce, fuel. I cut almost all spending on myself. For more than a year, I didn't buy a single new outfit or pair of shoes. Once, my older son asked for a mango he had tasted at school. I hesitated for a long time before buying just one. It wasn't in my budget, but I wasn't strong enough to say no. I loved my child, and I also loved myself. I kept telling myself this was only a transition period. Things would get better. One day at work, I overheard workers talking about having to borrow money at extremely high interest rates. I thought, if only they could borrow at a lower rate, things might be easier. I shared this idea with someone who had often advised me before. He strongly opposed it and said I was not suited for that kind of activity. But I didn't listen. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. I believed I was helping others while creating extra income for my children. I became excited, then ambitious. I didn't fully understand the risks. When people borrowed money and then left their jobs, when cash flow didn't return as expected, fear began to set in. I realized I had stepped onto a dangerous path. A path that could cost me everything. That was a major fall. Not a small stumble, but a serious lesson that nearly destroyed my life. I had to stop, accept the consequences, and face my greatest fear, my two small children waiting for me at home. After that incident, I lost my job. Most of my savings disappeared. I stood in an empty space with no support and no safe options left. But even in that panic, one thing was clear. I had to become better. Not just for myself, but for my children. I pictured the life I wanted: financial independence, control over my time, a bright home where my children could grow up healthy and safe. I knew I could not continue doing anything wrong, no matter the reason. I needed a sustainable path, even if it was slow. Before the holiday season had even ended, I took my children and left again. I carried a quiet promise to myself. This was not the end. I was not allowed to fall. And if I could stand up again, I would stand stronger than ever. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. No money. No stable job. Two young children needing care every single day. But I refused to give up. I remembered the promise I had made: to live better, through the right path. I started working based on my real abilities. I reached out to people who had respected me before. I chose commission-based work where income depended entirely on my effort. I worked through rain and sun, through exhaustion and doubt. I learned how to sell, how to build relationships, how to be patient. After 6 months, results appeared. After 1 year, the company provided a car and a driver. I was trusted to manage 2 markets independently. Then COVID-19 arrived. The world slowed down. Supply chains broke. Orders were canceled. Payments stopped coming in. The people I worked with faced the risk of losing everything. I could not walk away. I saw it as my responsibility. I worked relentlessly with partners and factories, doing everything possible to recover funds, manage inventory, and reduce losses. There were nights I didn't sleep, calculating how to make sure no one lost everything. The pressure was overwhelming. I became tense and irritable, and I realized I was losing balance. I forced myself to pause, to care for my mental health, to stay clear-minded for the long road ahead. I believed that if I treated crisis as an ending, it would end me. But if I treated it as a cycle, opportunity would follow. During the pandemic, I saw opportunity: lower costs, available labor. I calculated risks carefully. If I was wrong, I knew how much I would lose. If I was right, I would open a new path. I trusted my judgment. When the moment came, I was ready. I recovered the money for those who had trusted me. I rebuilt my work on a stronger foundation. The day I bought my first car, I told my child about that rainy day years before, when the 3 of us fell on the road. Not to scare him, but to teach him this: life is not easy, but we always get to choose how we stand back up. Looking back now, I understand that my experiences were not meant to punish me. They were meant to shape me. I learned the strength that comes from a mother's instinct. I learned the value of integrity and responsibility. I learned to see opportunity inside hardship. I learned that no success is worth breaking the law or crossing ethical lines. And above all, I learned gratitude. The lotus grows from mud, and I became better because of the hardships I survived.